So everybody's got their computers? Okay.
For the benefit of the council in the room, we have a few more cameras in the room today, but we are still limited in microphones. So please enunciate clearly. I will move one up when our delegations are speaking. And we'll actually black out this screen once Rob's finished his presentation. Okay, thank you. Over to you.
Okay, so it's 1:01, and I will call today's meeting to order. We'll now do the acknowledgement of Indigenous peoples. The town of Rocky Mountain House wishes to acknowledge that the land on which we gather is Treaty 6 territory and a traditional meeting ground and home for many Indigenous peoples, including the Blackfoot, Cree, Saulteaux, Stoney, and Métis. Okay, we have an agenda in front of us. Does anybody have anything they would like added to the agenda? Motion to accept the agenda then as presented. Councillor Narang, all in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Move on to number 4, delegations. We have Rod Bixie from Wild Rose Assessment Services. Welcome, Rod. Thanks for coming in today. So I will turn it over to you, Rod. You have a PowerPoint that, as I said, maybe we'll just kind of briefly go through. I know quite a few of us have questions, so leaving time for that. So I'll turn it over to you. Welcome.
So I'm sure all of you have read through the presentation that I have given. Any questions, feel free to ask, but I'm going to start right on page 6 and just highlight a few pages and then field questions. If I'm unable to answer a question today, I will certainly get back to you, but I think we can cover them all. So the first one we're going to cover has a heading called Assessment Cycle. And there's just a couple of things on here that are kind of important to review. We are very, very legislated as to what we do, how we do it, when we do it, the whole gamut. So July 1st are set for market value. So the assessments that everybody received in the entire province is set July the 1st, 2019. So when the public in Rocky get their assessment, I'm already 1 year behind the ball. And this is a big year to be behind for obvious reasons. If the market continues to do what it's doing, the same conversation may occur next year, because if it slides as fast as what it might, people are going to receive their assessment notices again and not be able to relate it to the current day market conditions. We assess the physical condition of a property December 31st. If I'm building a house, partially built, we assess 100% complete. December 31st, provincial, cut and dry. House burns down January 15th. Very sorry, was the house there December 31st? Yes. That person will get an assessment notice, including their house, because it was there December 31st. February 28th is the date that I have to turn the assessment over to the municipality. That's the last possible date I can do it. I can do it earlier. We have municipalities that send out their assessment notice and taxation notice separately, and they get their assessment roll in January, because they're sending their notices out very soon. And by doing that, they know what their assessment will be pretty much before they set the mill rate. So there's a big, big plus there. It's an extra mailing, but I think the plus outweighs the negative side to it. When I turn the roll over before Feb 28, the assessment roll has to go to the provincial government, and it has to pass guidelines. Once it passes those guidelines, they give it back to us. Then I do forward it to the town of Rocky Mountain House, and then the wheels start. Now, if we're going to go to page 16, and once more, any questions or anything else in between, feel free to ask. Okay, this is the important one that really affects this year. On this map, or on this graph, I'm going to be referring to this section first, and then this section second. So the bottom half first. So what that is, if you notice on there in the yellow highlighter, it says that I'm using sales from the middle of 16 to the middle of 19. Those are legislated dates that I have to use by the province. All the way through this entire report, it'll follow those dates as well. On the bottom section, I had 19 sales. I had a median assessment highlighted of 99.6. So what that means is if I have a sampling of 19 sales, the one dead center is the median, and it is at 99.6. If I was at 94.5, I would fail. If I'm over 105, I fail. It has to fall between 0.95 and 1.05. But to put that in different terms, what that means is if I have an assessment of $95,000 and it sells for 100, that's a 95% ratio. If I have an assessment of 105 and it sells for 100, it's a 105% ratio. So typically assessors try to stay on the lower premise than the higher for all these reasons. Also, we have a 7% coefficient of dispersion, and all that does is it measures the extremes. If I look at that graph there, if I was to have one at 20% and one at 180%, my coefficient of dispersion would be 20, 30, 40. It'd be a real big number, and I would fail my audit with the province because it doesn't make any sense to the real world. So your coefficient of dispersion has to be less than 50. Also on that same graph, where it says the median assessment, if you look directly underneath it, it says the minimum percentage, 78.3, and then on top it says the maximum, 129.1. So that means I have an assessment of their 78%. I also have an assessment of 129%. So one assessment is 29% higher than what it sold for. And one is, what is that, 12%, 22% less on the other side of the scale. It's an average. You're going to have some on both sides. Not everything is going to fall nice in that little window. It just doesn't work that way. So that is what I base the current assessment on. That's all the information I have. As after June 30th, July 1st of 2019, I cannot use that information. That's used on the next year's assessment cycle. It doesn't exist in my world. It can't exist because legislation tells me that. Now, if I look at the top part of the page, same thing. These are older type houses, 800 square feet. There's many, many of them in Rocky Mountain House. Everything is being the same, except if you notice where the yellow is, I'm using sales after my my legislated date of July 30th, 2019. So now I'm taking sales July 1st, 2019 to current sales. These sales come to us through land titles. When a property sells, we know where it sold, who sold it to, all the stuff on it. Now, on the current assessment, I was 99.6. Now I'm 107.4%. As the ratio gets higher, these values are dropping backwards to what you think. So in this case, if I was to prepare the assessment today, this property would probably get at least an 8%. It'd be valued 8% lesser than what it is today because of what the market is showing. It's because oil's obviously fallen off the face of the earth. COVID-19 is not doing us any favors. All of those have an impact on the economy and, of course, the assessment. So that's what happens there. So when the public gets their assessment in 2020, most common question I get is, aren't you aware of what's happening up there? And so it does take a long conversation to get there. Hopefully I get there to everyone I speak to, but I certainly try to. Now if I go to the next page, these are typically houses built between 1960 and 1980. My house falls in this range. There's a lot of housing in there as well. Same numbers work as I explained before, except our ratios are different now. So for an example, this one had a 90.
Excuse me, the lower part, this one, or the upper part?
Oh, you did move on?
I can, but it would be small.
Okay, we'll do the, well, the The bottom part, which is today's assessment, is 98.4%. So I fall between 95 to 105. But if I look at the sales that have occurred after my analysis date, they're 105.5. So when Mrs. Smith calls me and says, well, my value isn't there today, I'm not going to disagree with her. I have to convince her and show her why legislation tells me I'm back here. And I explain, if I could tell what the assessment was going to be this far in the future, I'd be a variable from there. You cannot do it. It's just impossible. So this is for an average house, built 60s, 80s, 2x4 construction, typical net. Now on the next page, I have ones that are built after 1980, still sort of an average house, just newer construction practices. That's when 2x6 construction came in, more energy efficient. At that point, that's what this page shows. And once again, there is a 9% shift downwards in the market. So every sampling I did pushed the assessments or the sale prices down, which will be reflected in next year's assessment. The following page is above average of housing. Same thing. These have bells and whistles, not quite a typical Levon style starter house. Many of these houses as well, and they see a slide of about 9%. Next one are duplexes. This is the one that showed the biggest decrease to me. This showed a 20% shift downwards. And that was based on 9 sales, so that was a pretty healthy sample. Am I going too fast here in any of this? Or I'm grabbing it? Okay. Townhouses, 1 sale. I really hope I get some more sales. With 1 sale, it doesn't really tell me a lot. It's 1 sale on the map. It's hard to grade with that. But the 1 sale does show me that, again, values are dropping. I can take the same presentation and put it in Lacombe or Pinoca or Innisfail or Silver Lake, and it's the same, or Red Deer, it's the same thing. Mobile homes sliding backwards as well. And condominiums. Now on the condominiums, you have 4 condo plans in town that are residential. I did not analyze which condos these came out of, but overall they're going down. So theoretically, I might have 1 condo that stays kind of flat. I might have 1 that goes up, 1 that goes down. They're not all necessarily going to react the same. Again, depends on market and the sales.
What number is that?
24. Okay. Now this is from the auditor, and as I said, we're audited every year. So this comes from the province of Alberta, and this is the findings on their audit. It broke it down a little different than I did, but it shows there's 4 quartiles. The first one being the lowest value, the 4th one being the highest. I split mine out by duplexes and townhouses and houses and mobile homes. They don't in this study, but it shows you the ratio, assessment to sale, of 96, 97, 96, 95, 7. So they all fall within the amount. So what will happen is if I talk to Mrs. Smith again out there, she says you're $20,000 too high. Just period, you're 20,000. Everyone in town is 20,000 too high. Well, if I was to lower everyone's property assessment 20,000, I would fail every one of my assessment sales ratios. I would send it up to Edmonton. They would send it back down to me and say, this is not acceptable. You have to fix the assessment before we will allow the town to get it to do their business. So I really am legislated as to what I can do. I tried to get as close to 95 as I could because I knew what was happening. And I'm overall within like 1.3% or 0.13% of 95, so I'm very close. If you go to the next slide, this is just my summation of my presentation of comparing the assessments. And there you can see in a summary how much the different properties have slid the wrong way. And really nobody wants that in their right mind, because you want your value to always increase, so when you go to market it, it's there to be a good investment. You don't want to go backwards. So you can see how they have slid. Again, townhouses only had 1 sale. Condos had 4. The older ones had 5, so there are limited sales in there a bit. Now on the bottom, these sales only take us to March 31st. I do my analysis until June 30th. So I still have some more months to put in here. But if this trend stays the same, it's not going to be going the other direction. It's going to be going backwards for valuation purposes. I do want to cover one more page and then I'll field questions. And the next one is this. And I think it's kind of an important one in today's economy. We have more municipalities going this way. So early mailing of assessment notices. If it's mailed by mid-March, I said, I can give you your assessment roll by the end of January. So you can have it mailed much, much earlier. So that when it comes to your budgeting time, you have a real close handle as to what that assessment is going to be and structure your mill rate around that process, obviously. There is an extra cost incurred of mailing. That is true. Yeah. Oh yeah, and of course you cannot appeal a tax. All you can do is appeal an assessment. So if Mrs. Smith gets her assessment at 300 and she talks to me and we discuss it, she says, yeah, that's reasonable. And then she gets her tax notice and doesn't like the tax notice. Taxes cannot be appealed. Only thing that can be appealed is an assessment. And at that point, the appeal period has passed. You don't have to change your mailing date for your taxes either. There's a lot of people budget around that, I realize, so that can be solid. I've missed a lot of information. Any questions in there, please ask me, or any questions as to what I did present.
Mr. Phillips?
Now that you presented this, it makes a lot more sense to me how the assessed value comes out. Is there anything going back to the province to ask them to change, especially in times like this where the market is good? And same thing happened in 2006 when the market was going on like this, to modify it a little bit to allow you to use less older comparable sales.
You know,
and bring it more current to get better assessed value.
we have asked that indirectly. We have asked that the ratios be moved from 95 to 105 down to 90 to 110 for smaller communities. If I'm in the city of Calgary, you know, I'm looking at how many, I'm looking at 6 mobile home sales. Well, they probably have thousands of them. So they can squeeze that in. When I come into a smaller municipality, and imagine how tough it would be for the Carolines of the world when you only have one, and I have to make the fall between 95 to 105, it's difficult. So we have asked for that to be adjusted to no avail. That's a long way of saying no.
Even in the lack of comparable sales data, and I know this from my profession, a lot of the times you're using for intuition and your assessment of the currently, when there is no sales data, you can't do that.
No, but what I will do is, I get a copy of everything that is sold. I don't know that Mrs. Smith had her property up for sale for 6 months. I just don't know that. So what we will do is, before I send the assessment roll out, I'll look on realtor.ca and I'll just have a browse through quickly to see if I'm in the ballpark. And in most cases I am. We find the odd property that just doesn't make sense to us, and we will inquire. So we use that tool to reinforce what we do. But we're limited.
Councillor Fraser?
I guess a hypothetical, what happens if there are no sales? If we had one townhouse, what if that townhouse is not sold by the time your date happens? Mathematically, what happens?
And it will happen. So a townhouse, kind of similar to a condo or a fourplex. Hopefully I have a sale or two in there that show me a negative 12%. I would probably apply that same 12 to townhouses, because it sort of makes sense that it would fall in the same strata, fall in the same area. Hopefully I get more than one sale for townhouses though.
Councillor Phillips, did you have a question?
Just going back to pulling data through realtor.ca, do you have access to the data on what's listed?
We do not. Okay. And we're also very cautious with realtor.ca because I can list my house for 400,000. It's only worth 300. It doesn't mean that I jack that assessment up to 400. They can be asking to move and it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
That was the point I was gonna bring up.
Yeah, so we don't really
The asking
get
price, the
aggressive on
sale
changing
price.
assessments because of that.
Yeah, they can be a sale price and the asking price can be very.
And the other reason I can't do it in my world is because I would lose equity. If I start going to all these 12 properties that are listed really high and change them all, well, how does that create equity with all the other ones I haven't touched? So you have to be careful as to how you process that. The one thing we will find on Realtor.ca that we may not know is basement finish. It may have basement finish and we're not aware of it, and I will put basement finish in that case. Because now I know it's there. And it's harder to get into houses to find basement finish. Even before COVID-19, I'll knock on doors and I can hear parents in there playing with their children. They look at me and they don't know me and that door's not open. And I can't blame the parents. And now COVID-19 puts another layer between me and getting into the houses. And I don't know how many sales I've gone to where the basements are finished and there's never a permit taken out. Surprise. And so,
How often do you get into a property then?
how often do I sort?
Do you get into a property? But do you physically go?
Physically get in? I bet you we're less than 10%. Like it's becoming almost a point of doing mailings out instead and asking.
So by
So it is very difficult to do.
what about businesses?
Well, businesses are different, they're open.
Okay, so how often do you go to a business then to assess?
If I was to go to a business, just pick a building downtown that has been the same forever. You know, it's a typical store you walk into, nothing has changed. It's leased out to Mr. and Mrs. Smith. That one we will go into occasionally, but we really don't have to because when we send our RFIs out, request for information, we're asking for the lease information then. And that's how it's going to be loosely valued. So we do get into more commercial and residential.
But don't you think to be more accurate, you should get out there and get into more residential?
Yes. If someone goes to my wife's door, she's home today, she's not answering that door.
No, and I hear what you're saying, but what I'm thinking is we need to figure out a way to get.
Okay. I agree. But what's happening is it's going away from that type of inspection. And I get one in the city of Red Deer and I can send it to you. I fill it in. What do I have for basement finish? Have I redone my kitchen, redone my washrooms, windows, doors, siding, a whole bunch of stuff. I fill it out, I send it in. The assessor then gets it, puts the data into the assessment field, and my assessment comes in. That is the more common way of doing it. But by far, more common.
But it's more accurate.
It is more accurate. There is a cost incurred. It has to go out. We find if we send items out from us, there's no teeth. If it comes with Rocky Mountain House header, now it has teeth. So I would love to do a mailing here. I'd be all over that. It's a direction I have to be given from you folks, being council.
Councilor Fraser, then Councilor Phillips.
I guess one of the misconceptions that I run across a lot is that the town itself does the assessment, and so you are an independent contractor, you do your math, and you send it to the province to be audited before we have it to send out with our mill rate, correct?
Correct.
And we don't tell you we want it between 100 and 105, because I know a lot of people have said to me, oh, well, the town has told them to be on the high end of that, and we don't even have contact with people.
No, that's a very good point. When I created the assessment, administration, council, nobody within the town tells me that I should be addressing a certain property this way, that I should be doing whatever. They let me do my assessment independent, arm's length of anybody in Rocky Mountain. It is not created with their direction to do anything.
Councilor Phillips.
So in listening to this explanation of how things are figured out in a balanced real estate market, when things are going, this system works very well. In the market where it goes this way, but this way, in a rapid change, it's not the most effective system. And it's flawed basically from a provincial mandated point of view, because you have to do it in certain ways.
Like one day we're gonna come out of this and my assessments won't be able to catch up to the market. My phone won't ring at all. It'll be very, very quiet. Because everyone I talk to, I did a presentation in a seniors condo. And there must have been 40 years of people there, and they were all quite buzzed. And so I said, can anyone tell me here what their assessment is? Put up your hand. Everyone's hand went up. I said, can anyone tell me here what their assessment is? Not one hand went up. No one knew what their assessment was. The concern is tax. That's what hits the bottom. So the tax was too high. So I had to explain how assessment worked and went through that process. And we were fine. But people deal with taxes, as you said, Lynn.
So basically, this is a provincial issue that we have to somehow have them address your parameters for doing
And
this.
my guess is the Alberta Assessors Association does communicate with municipal affairs. Limited success, but we do get our voice heard every so often. Probably much stronger when you go through your AUMA conventions where it can be presented there, because then you have a lot of people speak. And a lot of municipalities, a lot of votes. Assessors is pretty small. And I'm sure it's come up in conversation with other municipalities.
So overall, how many properties do you think went up that, I guess you can't really tell, can you?
Sorry, I don't have that in front of me.
Yeah. And
I'll get back to you on that.
Okay,
That I don't have in front of me.
okay. Thank you. Councilor
And
Phillips?
just to clarify, when you were talking about commercial, you were talking about leasing per square footage.
Yeah.
Do you do more value on the lease approach, or do you do more value on direct cost comparison approach, replacement value?
Well, how we do it, we have some municipalities that do pure income or pure lease. Yeah, I have the same.
Yeah, it's scary.
So what we do is we'll use our sales and we'll try to support it with lease rates and back it up that way. But to go to a pure lease, I find is, give you another example, in a different town, kind of close to here. I was talking to a ratepayer. Their property's worth $1 million. They're convinced it's worth $1 million. They can sell it for $1 million. When I analyze their lease, it's only worth $700,000. That municipality has chosen to go only that way on the assessments. I can't assess it at $1 million. I have to assess it at 700. So if I go to $1 million, I don't have equity. I'm treating him totally different than anyone else. So we use a combined approach here.
Okay, that's good. Yeah.
Councilor Hall?
Question for that. As a real estate agent, when you go to market a house, how much of that is based off of the actual assessment?
I don't use, honestly, the assessed value doesn't come into play. I use direct comparable sales typically over the last 6 months is what I typically do. And in most cases, as you said, there's always one high one, one low one. They generally get thrown out of the mix and you use the.
So it should be pretty close to what that assessed value is. They're doing the same.
No, simply because they're using data from 2016, 17, 18, 19. I use only 2020 data at this point. I wouldn't use anything for 2019.
We have to use that 3-year window. The only people that can get away from it is City of Calgary, where they have so many sales that they can use a 6-month window and get a huge sample. We don't have that luxury in any. Red Deer can't do that, as far as I know.
First question, just going back to inspection fraud, we physically inspect a certain percentage of the town per year.
Yes, there's a percentage we go by, correct. Now, do we knock on every single door? No, we do
Yeah,
not.
well, I just want clarification that you actually have to.
Yes,
Inspect properties, 20% per year.
I think it was 12. Yes, it is a 5% number. When I go buy a new home in, I'll say the subdivision or any new house. And we're on there on the initial inspection, and the house is finished up and down. It's 2 years old, 5 years old. What can they change in that house? The flooring, everything is still original. It's in really good shape. Basement is done. There's nothing I can touch to that assessment to increase it. So on that type of property, we will not go inside the house. Or attempt to.
Do you keep a record of homes that you do physically assess? And do we know,
Yeah.
do
at
we
times
get a copy of that? Like, how are we guaranteed how many houses are actually being physically?
Well, I guess the audit reviewed it, and I know we passed the audit side of that. Like, I can say that. How we do it is if I'm doing a big crescent or a couple of blocks or whatever, we'll mass input a phrase saying, properties inspected between March 8th to March 10th, 2019, knocked on doors. And so that's how we keep track of it. When I get into the house, I will make a comment. Do we always make that comment? I'll have to say no. There's times when I know I don't, but I know I've made a note that I've inspected, or our office has.
So I guess, would it be beneficial for us as a municipality then to know how many properties, what percentage of properties in town have actually been inspected?
Sure.
And, it's no different than our utility bill, or if there's an estimate or an actual, right? It would be sort of the same type of notation.
Now we do, as Dean alluded to, 20%. Now, not every year is going to be 20, some's going to be slightly over, some's going to be, it's going to average out to 20, but not every year will be exactly 20%.
So how do we know that we're getting the 20%? I guess that's my question. If we're supposed to be getting 20% physically assessed,
Yeah.
how do we know we're getting 20% physically assessed? Where is that marked down?
Yeah, I have it in my records. I guess that's how I know.
But do we have it in our records?
No, you would never, and I don't know of any municipality that would, but no, you wouldn't have it in your records anywhere. I would have to.
So is that something
I'll find if I
we
can
need
do
to
a report.
request?
I'll see if I can find a report for you on that.
But I'm thinking going forward,
Okay, actually, yeah. I know what you're asking, and I can prepare a report for that. I know what you're asking. Okay. Good question. Does anybody have any questions?
Betty, did you have a question?
I was asking, between the taxpayers and the assessment, the number that floats is the tax rate. I think part of what the issue this year is people think when their assessment goes down, their taxes will go down. And we still deal with the same dollar value that we're collecting. So if your assessment goes down and we're still collecting $9,000, the number that changes is the tax rate percent. Because we want the same number of dollars. And when we start having big drops in assessment, that's where the residents, I think, get confused, because they think they're gonna get a lower tax bill, and they don't. So unless we cut our services and collected 12% less, their tax rates will stay the same, regardless of the assessment on your house.
Many people I talk to, I say, if the market has dropped as much as you say it has, and everybody in town got the exact same percentage, commercial, resident, everybody, your taxes wouldn't change one bit. Mill rate would jump and your taxes would be exactly what they are. Exactly what was said. People think this happens to the assessment, the taxes follow suit. They don't.
So I guess the real question today is how are we dealing with the assessment from this year? We need to prepare for the assessment.
Well, first of all, send them to me. That's part of my portfolio. And I've talked to, I'm keeping track of how many people I've talked to. And I've kept, I have one full page. People I've talked to. Besides the hit of the economy and everything and explaining July 1st of last year, for the most part, it's being understood. Some people don't like it because they just don't like what's happening out there. Nothing much I can do about that. But I've been talking to anyone, and I get a phone call, I call him back and I talk to him. I'd say within 2 days, in his first week, I've been on the one very quickly.
I guess my question is for next year, our assessment for next year, as a municipality, we need to start figuring out how we're gonna deal with that.
It's from 12% assessment.
Exactly, and so we have to prepare for that. But that comes in a different discussion. Rod, and then Councilor Fraser?
I'm sorry, were there any questions on the part of the presentation I did not discuss verbally? If so, bring it forward.
Councilor Fraser?
I was just going to say that I like the idea of mailing the assessment first. Just so the assessment and all of that is separate from, I guess, the emotional part of taxation, which seems to be a hard thing for people to separate. And it also gives them a heads up. And perhaps we could send with that assessment explanation of the dates and when it's done and how many properties are assessed physically. Just kind of an explanation that's, because I think once they see the number at the bottom, I know lots of people don't even look at the breakdown. They just see the number at the bottom. So if we kind of separated some of those numbers away, it might make more sense to people when the tax bill does come out.
I totally agree with that. I know other municipalities do that, and assessments come in January, and you see if you're going up, and you're prepared, your assessment's going up.
I think you might need a bylaw for that, I am not sure. I would think you would of some sort. And also what other municipalities do that is not as common is, if I go to Mrs. Smith and she says her house is 300,000, she doesn't say, oh, my land is worth 100 and my house is worth 200. She says it's worth $300,000. So a lot of municipalities go to a one number assessment. No land value, no improvement value, one number, what's your property worth? It's worth that much. Just
So
food for thought.
we're basically just looking at one other mailing. How much does it cost for one mailing to go out to our citizens? We don't.
90 cents a letter, so.
Okay,
Were we looking at whether we could email some of the assessments as well from the folks who are on e-billing?
Your worship, I think we have to look at the NGA, but
Might reduce the cost further.
so does that sound like a direction we would like to go then, is to do the assessment early in the year? And then that prepares the public, they know if their assessment has gone up or down.
Yeah, if there's this many people upset, I think it makes sense, as long as they also know that there's an additional cost to it,
Right,
right?
it's more money to the
You get what
budget.
you ask for, it also costs more.
The only thing I ask is let me know as soon as you do, so I can get your assessment rolled to you on the earlier end instead of the Feb 28th end.
All right, does anybody have any other questions for Rod? Well, thank you very much for your presentation, Rod.
Hope I didn't muddle the waters too much.
No, it's what it is, assessment.
I hope I didn't realize it would be from a time frame.
Right,
And I don't think it'd be all.
no,
That's why I think that maybe that's closer to when that value is. Because when you get it in July, you've had another 6 months for things to get better or worse, so it's really far away.
But then, like you said, when you get your tax notice, you're not looking at the assessment, you're looking at all of your charge for taxes. This separates the two issues.
Mhm.
So it creates a time to reflect, time to look at it, and then out comes the tax notice. But
maybe we need to do can we do some sort of an assessment breakdown of how it happens? Like just a real, yeah, like a really easy to follow, easy to read, easy to understand page that, so that we can help everybody understand how the assessment is done.
especially when we're using comparables that are 3 years old, that will really help people understand why, why things are the way they are.
Is there something out there that already exists like that?
I'm sorry, I wasn't part of the conversation.
Do you have a really simple, easy to follow educational tool that we could work off of to explain how your assessment works?
Like a mailing for the public? you mean?
Yeah, but keep it, because
I
it's a
know,
lot to take in.
I know it is. I know it is, and I appreciate you listening to my,
We follow him.
my rambling a little bit.
Camera.
Yeah, I can make up a little brochure to put out in the mailing next year, if you would like,
Yeah, or
or
even,
even one for your webpage.
yes, that would be ideal.
I'll make one, okay.
Laura?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just going to speak up to the microphone's picking up. Currently, our website with questions about how the assessment works is driven to the provincial website, which has a lot of those materials.
Right,
But
but
it does exist, but if you want a simplified infographic breakdown, then it's something we have to work on.
I think that would be very beneficial. Simplify it and make it easy for people to read, and we put it on our website.
I'll try to do that earlier than later.
Rather than, people having to go on, anybody that wants to go on to the provincial website and click on all the links, a lot of people don't have time to do that, and if we can make it easier for them to understand the assessment, I think it's better.
A lot of people, once they see a link, they turn off.
Yeah, it's
Yes.
a lot of work, And especially if you're not familiar with the terminology, and so I think if we can make it easy for people to read and understand.
Yeah, I agree. And I won't make it wordy, I'll try to make it
Can't be wordy.
really direct to the point.
Yeah. Well, just because it's easier. I mean, I don't want to look at a bunch of words on something. I just want like a nice, quick, simplified version to look at and understand quickly, if that's possible with this. I know assessment it's a complicated issue. I do know that, but. Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for coming.
Well, thank you for having me. Any questions, you know where to reach me.
Sure.
If I'm not there, ask someone else in the office. And if I am there, ask someone else in the office.
Okay. Thanks, Rod.
You're very welcome.
Okay, bye now.
Have a great day.
You too. Okay, we're going to move on to number 5, adoption of the previous minutes, town council meeting minutes from May 19, 2020. Everybody's had a chance to read those. Okay, so just looking for a motion to accept. Councilor Fraser?
I can make that motion.
Okay, all in favor of that motion to accept? Okay, that's carried, thank you. Move on to number 6, delegation business. Dean, would you, kind of sounded like we had a few action items out of that presentation.
Yeah, Your Worship, I think I'm hearing a report to council on proposing the cost of setting up separate assessment taxation invoices.
Yeah. Okay, so do you want a motion to do that? Okay, Councilor Phillips? So what will the motion be? Just,
Yeah, that's council instructing administration to bring back reports on the advantages and disadvantages of separate taxation and assessment invoices.
everybody clear of that motion? Okay, all in favor of that motion? That's carried, thank you. And did you hear anything else there? Asking him to,
Your Worship, I think we need to follow up on the physical inspections
Yeah.
of properties, because that's actually a contractual requirement as well for assessment.
and that's what I thought, so that's why I think we should be asking for data on how many properties or who's, I mean, not to be public, obviously, but who is that portion of the contract being fulfilled?
And administration to follow up with that.
Okay.
That was that.
Okay, so just a motion to then follow up with Wild Rose Assessments to understand if we're meeting the 20% physical assessment inspections. Okay. Is everybody clear on that motion? I'll make that motion then. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. And that was good. Education component, do we need a motion for that, or we'll just have what?
Your worship, I can just follow up on
Okay.
that.
Okay, sounds good. Okay. Moving on to 7.1.
Do we need to accept this report?
Your worship, I mean, the two resolutions come out.
We're basically accepting it.
Okay, moving on to 7.1, extension of interest penalties for accounts receivable and utility transfer to taxes. Ms. Quinlan?
Thank you, your worship and council. So we're bringing this item back to you on March 23rd at the beginning of the COVID pandemic. We did suspend interest fees for accounts receivable, which included accounts receivable and utilities, for a period of 90 days, which is until June 15th, with the snap coming out. So we thought we would bring this back, just to see if the council had any preferences on what they would like to do. We can, I mean, basically, we have two options. We can carry it on or extend the timeline, or we can just let it lapse. Right now, there's basically about $2,100 is what we would typically be charging out in terms of penalties on an average month. We haven't heard a lot of what other municipalities are doing. We did recently hear that Red Deer has not extended theirs, so they're gonna just let it lapse. But I guess I'll just open that up for discussion. And we also extended, the utility balances weren't being transferred to taxes until 120 days, so that won't lapse until July.
So do we know how many people are taking advantage of deferring their or postponing their payments?
Not per se. I mean, I did look at, and it's in the COVID forecast, I did look at the utility receipts, and in May, they have dropped. I was comparing from last year to this year. So the utility receipts are down about $134,000 for the month of May, which is 40%. So I do think there has been some postponement, but I don't have the exact number of.
So the maximum it's costing us is about $2,100 per month then?
I would, yeah, that's the average. In last year, we averaged about that per month in terms of utility penalties.
Okay. Anybody have any questions? Councilor Fraser?
Now, the provincial government has discussed not renewing the health emergency. Does that, just because I know there was some legislation surrounding COVID and the state of emergency, if that's not renewed, does that affect what we can collect or can't collect, or think we need to collect?
I don't think so.
Any other questions? Okay, so what would council like to do? Councilor Phillips?
With further discussion, I'd like to make a motion that council approve the administration waive charge of any interest fees for overdue accounts, receivable and utility billings that were incurred after March 15th until September 1st, 2020.
Thank you. All in favor of that motion? Okay, and that's carried, thanks. And now the utilities and arrears, that they not be transferred to the property taxes until September 1st. Okay, Councilor Narang? All in favor of that motion? And that's carried. Thank you. We'll move on to number 7.2. Oh, sorry.
I'm just checking to see if I'm next.
Nope, you're not. We have Friendship Center, 7.2. And who?
Mayor, is it okay if I present from here? Can everybody hear me okay? Or-
Well, I don't know that the microphones will hear you, though, is the only thing. Oh,
Yeah.
thanks. Okay, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Your worship. So there was a council meeting a couple meetings ago. I'm just gonna pull it up here and get the date. May 19th, Mr. Big Child attended a council meeting to provide an update on some funding that he was received, or he had received through FCSS. He was in part of the council and has entered into a partnership with them. There was various, some options that he had provided to council, and council was looking for some clarification on what he was looking for. An email was sent to him, just requesting more information, and he got back to us. So what I've done is I provided a table breaking down what some of the costs would be. One of the items that he was looking for in terms of support from the town would be for one or two staff to come to the Friendship Center and help build some of these baskets and kits that he's assembling with some of the funding that he received. So what I did was I looked at two staff at a 2-hour maximum. It's, once a week at the very most. I don't anticipate that it would be on a weekly basis. I think it might be maybe every 2 or 3 weeks that would occur. So I basically came up with a number of about $100 per assembly event. So, and that would be for two staff at 2 hours maximum. The other request was for some town swag to go into the baskets or assembly kits. So I provided a listing there of what the various costs are for some of the items that I thought might be applicable for some of these kits. Water bottles and mugs, for example, are kind of on the higher end, which might not be, the best, use of money, but I did provide the information there because I think it's really up to council where they would want to allocate those resources. Chapstick, pens, there's also fabric grocery bags, which might be appropriate, and then advertising support and posters at council's discretion, but I'm thinking something on the website to help promote, these kits that are going out. Maybe for Big Child already has a PDF of some of the information that we can help promote these assembly kits to some of the residents in the area. So I've basically gone through, provided some of the ideas. I think the crafting ideas, he was just looking for ideas. He's not looking for anything physically to go into the kits. I think, what could be done is perhaps an email go out to all staff and just ask if they have some neat crafting ideas that are, have easy to use materials, doesn't cost a lot, and ask them to send them. We could collect those emails and just maybe do a package for him just with those ideas. And then again, the delivery of kits to doorsteps in the town vehicle was another idea that Mr. Big Child had. And it would be, I guess, the cost of mileage and one staff person to deliver. And limitations can be put on that as well. It could be, you know, if staff is available to assist, we could say no more than a couple hours a week, or, you know, a couple of hours like each time they go out, or maybe some staff would be willing to volunteer as well. Just putting it out there. I don't know if there's other people that would be interested in volunteering, but, you know, whether we wanted to participate in that, we could send again an email out asking for volunteers, or we could allocate a certain amount of money for that. So I wanted to just provide that information and get some council direction on that.
So I suppose there would be a confidentiality that you would probably have to sign as well. If these are a hamper type.
I would expect with that there would be but that would be the responsibility of the Friendship Center or Soquin to have those, so that people that are delivering, you know, that they are adhering to confidentiality.
Councillor Lorraine?
Do we need to be cautious though about how much we are giving to one organization and what that's gonna look like as far as people standing on our wanting all types of volunteer hours from town employees? But on the flip side of that is within our HR policy, do we have like a volunteerism? You know how there's like the corporate volunteer programs within certain organizations? Do we have such a thing for our staff where they can donate a certain number of paid hours to the community members?
Worship, no,
Is that something that is normal within a municipality at all as a per?
worship, no, no, definitely not. It's useful, dollars that we use, that's where we're more cautious.
So that both of those then, that's my major concern is that we would be dedicating a bunch of staff time to one organization. So my solution to spread it out was the policy such as that, but I mean, where we already have a grant on there, so. Just what I'm thinking ahead of what we're gonna hear. But I like a hampers and swag.
Councillor Fraser?
My understanding was that they were going to donate them to the whole community though, right? So what I like is he's got contact people who are in need, and sometimes there's a gap between, you know, government and the people who need the help.
I just really speaking about the volunteer time,
Oh,
not the swag. I think that giving of the gifts is great. I just was speaking to the actual volunteer time of the industry. I'm happy to do it.
Would this be, we have summer students, so would we utilize summer students then?
Yeah, and maybe, your worship, just for clarification, I mean, it's not that we don't utilize school employees for community good. I mean, like the grad this year is an example of that. Like we are putting resources towards the grad. So,
It does get spread out.
yeah. Sorry, your question on the summer students.
Yeah. Oh, just, would we be utilizing summer students for this?
Yes, or some staff still have this facility.
Okay.
I think it'd paint a clearer picture if we knew how often, like exactly, not just guessing how often, is it every 2 weeks or is it every week? Because there might be a cost, the cost would be, okay, whatever, $100 for 2 hours worth approximately. But what about, like, can they actually be out of doing their regular job during that time? So what's happening with their actual work and how many more hours is that going to take to fill in? Because who's actually doing that job? So it's not actually that dollar amount, it's actually way more than that. Personally, I don't mind volunteering, as council. I'm not going to speak for everybody, but I don't mind giving some of my time. But I also want to know how much is every 2 weeks or is it every week? Is it regular? Is it on certain days of the week so that I can also plan around that? Those are the type of details I like to know when we're doing things like this. But outside of giving some time, I don't mind.
Yeah, so your worship, if it's staff time that council is looking at, the administration would ask to be limit on that.
And I said before, I wouldn't mind volunteering either. So I'd like to limit as much cost as possible, and but certainly show our support in any way that we can.
I'd give my time for sure, yeah, absolutely.
So what are we saying then? Are we not wanting staff to do this, or what am I, I'm kind of not clear on what I'm hearing.
I think personally that I would rather see like if we can do it, and if there's not enough people for some reason, because I think they want to come in either way. I'm okay with committee. I think that we can find time every couple of weeks to do something like that. Again, you know, if there was a million organizations after that, that might be different, but it's not right now, so.
Yeah, I like the idea of that. If we can't fulfill helping, maybe we could drive and deliver them as well, right? With the town car, we're all licensed to drive that or approved to drive that car, so I certainly would do that. Councillor Phillips?
I mean, every request we get for these type of scenarios are gonna ask for different asks. Some are gonna ask for town employee time, some may ask for swag, some may ask for just our support. So I mean, we have to kind of deal with them individually because they're all gonna be different. This particular one, yes, if we as a group can do that without asking for town employees to do it, that's great. But if we can't, I would support this ask of using town employees for a couple hours.
I would also like, I think the fabric grocery bags with their town logo on would be a great idea. But again, we don't know the cost of that.
The cost for the fabric bags are.
Yeah, it's $275, but how
Yes.
many would we need? Yes.
Yes, if they deliver them to every single house, we have what, 2,200 residents? Like,
But I don't, my understanding is,
Selected.
yeah, they're not delivering to
Well,
every
no, I
household.
just, we'd have like an upper limit because times.
Worship council can limit the number of bags, and then if it exceeds that, we come back to council.
Okay.
I'm thinking, like, I don't know, somewhere around the 200 mark for the bags.
Okay.
Would be a great start. And, you know, we can ensure that they get those bags and get feedback from him, because I expect that they're not all gonna go out the door in a single, you know, swoop. They're going to be going out, I would assume, probably in multiples of maybe 100 or 150 or 50, you know, I'm not sure, but I think if we start with 200, we certainly can bring another report back. And having had that process being, you know, having them create the bags and getting them out, they might be able to provide us with more specific details, you know, if we were to come back again to council.
Just wanted some clarity as to who the target recipients are.
So I think they're people in the region, so it's not just within the town. So it will be going out to people within the region. And I'm not sure if it's like an application process that they have for that. I'd have to get those details from Mr. Bigchild. But I think that, you know, food security and family building types of activities are where his focus are.
Okay, that kind of helps. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, what direction do we want to go here? Anybody? Yeah, it's pretty. Can we just offer that there are some council members that are able to assist in putting the bags or the hampers together or packages together, but we need notice, you know, and sort of some sort of a time commitment. And if we're not going to be able to fulfill that, then we can look at more. Does that make sense? Or does any, Councilor Fraser?
I guess, would it be possible to pick up the supplies and take them with me to do them at home? Because I've got lots of time at home that I could do, but going to a physical place would require me to bring my kids. So, or even if I can deliver the stuff in my minivan, I know it's not as awesome as the town car, but if that's what they're looking for.
I would think that the bags would probably be done at a central location, just because you're putting multiple items into a bag.
Okay, so is that good enough? I mean, do we want to start with 50 bags as well?
Which I think the hard part is because they don't know the uptake on this.
Right.
Right, so it's hard to.
Yeah, it's super hard, and I just wonder if it's kind of a fluid ask, like, we just don't know what we're being asked for really yet.
Council feel free to come with a request, and we'll.
Yeah,
Do our best, yeah.
yeah. Councillor Narang?
Could we not just commit to the swag bags at this point, say we are willing to commit that and then figure out the best way? Like, I feel like we're really overthinking this.
Yeah.
That's in my head. But if we could just commit to the items themselves in the bags, and then as the demand, then we can figure out. They might even have volunteers that can come to the town office and put the swag bags together. But we're just providing them, like something like that. So there could be other ways of doing it. But if we just, at this point, what we know we can commit to is
Bags. Like, are we just saying the fabric grocery bags? Because he's got a budget that he is buying the products for to put that, and so that money is going toward the product.
that's right.
So I would like to see us give, donate our bags with our town logo.
Do we have bags already?
I don't know how many they would have in stock.
Because it would be neat to have the town logo and the Friendship Center logo on the bags.
Sorry,
Do you know if there's any of those swag bags? The logo, like how many?
Well, I don't know offhand, I know Jeff orders, so many at a time. So we may have 200 on
And that's
stock.
a good suggestion, to put both logos on. So do we want to just, right now, Councillor Alderson, did you have anything else?
No, I was just gonna say probably it's good to have a higher number. The reality is we can use it for other things. If we don't create enough, there's nothing to use. We don't know what the uptake's gonna be. And I don't know, it does feel like we're overthinking it, however, there's no details. So how do we convince and make a motion on something that there's no
Exactly.
need to it at the
That's
moment,
right.
so it's a little difficult. As far as the volunteering thing goes, I think it was said before that, there really isn't tons of volunteers. You could go elsewhere, but that's not the point. The point was to have town do it as a collaboration. Otherwise, it could have all been done probably by a volunteer basis, because there's a volunteer center.
Right. Dean Schrader, did you have something more?
I was just gonna comment, I'll ask Jeff Hartman how many bags we have. We do have a logo on them presently. I think it's where eventually means logo. So.
Okay.
However many we have, that'll do it.
Should we say 100 to start with?
Sure.
Is that a fair number?
It's a number we'll pick. Gotta pick something.
I think it's fair, because
I
these
think it's
programs
fair.
take a long, sometimes take a bit to get the uptake as well, so I think 100 is.
Okay. So I'm looking for a motion to commit 100 fabric grocery bags to the Friendship Center. Councillor Brown?
I'll make that motion.
And, okay. Do we need to add anything else about volunteer? They could come back and with more details.
Yeah, your worship, I think this is the start.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so all in favor of that motion? Okay, and that's carried.
Can I ask a question about just that process? Like, 100 grocery bags is a very small amount of money. Do we really need to make a motion for administration to do that? Just totally out of curiosity. That feels like a micromanagement to me.
Your worship, no administration like council says that was that level. So there's, I was surprised that we gave out 2,000.
Gotcha, okay. So it's something that we do need to do, establish a baseline for that.
Okay, we'll move on to number 7.3, the municipal emergency draft plan.
Sure, your worship, I'll take this one. Or two.
No, go ahead.
So under the Alberta Emergency Act, the municipality is required to have a municipal emergency plan. Our current one is over a decade old. So administration has worked, drafted a new municipal emergency plan. We've taken that emergency plan to our emergency committee, which consists of 3 council members, and we reviewed it with the committee. Now we are bringing it forward to council for council's review and hopefully adoption of the emergency plan.
Okay, so that was last week, wasn't it? We had our municipal
Yes.
emergency meeting.
Okay.
So it's Councillor Phillips, myself, and Councillor Brown, and we went through it with staff, actually section by section. So,
It's a lot of work, it's a big report.
yeah, so we were comfortable with it, and so I guess, does council want to go through it all today?
Or you can trust us.
We did go through it. It's a very thorough plan and very, very well thought plan. And, you know, thanks to the administration for putting together such a good orders of money. The town will benefit greatly if anything bad happens.
So we have a recommended action in front of us then. Councillor Brown?
If there's no other discussion, I'd like to make the motion that council adopt the Town of Rocky Mountain House municipal emergency plan as presented.
Okay, any other discussion? Okay, all in favor of that motion? And that's carried, thank you. Now we'll move on to number 8, health professional recruitment. That was my item. And my question is, I'm looking at possibly sending a letter to the physician recruitment committee, asking them to broaden their search and make it instead a healthcare recruitment,
Healthcare professional.
rural health care professional recruitment. And I did speak with Lara Harris this morning, and she works with RPAP. And she said that pretty much every other physician recruitment committee has gone to, we're pretty much the only one that is not. So I'm looking to send a letter to our physician recruitment committee to say, requesting that it be changed to this healthcare. Now, I'm looking for direction from the members that are on that committee, and maybe Dean for clarity. Would we have to change the entire committee, or?
Your worship, so the physician recruitment is actually a society on its own. So really what you're asking them to do is to change their terms of reference and to expand it to healthcare professionals versus just physicians.
And rename it then. Okay, Councillor Ryan, Councillor Brown?
Yeah, I just think that's it's sort of timely right now, because we're looking at doing that changeover, because we've been in contact with the chamber, and things like that, so that changeover is sort of right now, and I just don't think we can't. I think this is something that we must move forward on.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say as well. I just add as well that I think we need to ask ourselves whether there needs to be council or elected official representation on that on that committee as well.
Okay, Councillor Fraser, do you have your hand up?
Yes.
Okay.
I think it makes a lot of sense. Healthcare is complex and it involves more than just physicians. Everybody from sonographers to nurses, there's lots of moving parts, and to ignore those moving parts, we're putting a lot of stress and a lot of time on one particular avenue. And I think in the end, I think it's going to create a more balanced approach to healthcare and probably improve the quality of life for everyone involved.
Yep. Okay, Councillor Phillips?
I sat on this committee a couple of years ago, and the need for it was evident then, and it's more evident now, so I fully support that we go ahead and change or get this change to a health professional recruitment position.
So what we'll do is send a letter stating that we would like to see it changed to include all healthcare professionals in the area.
Do we want to specify a certain, like maybe get a little bit of a comprehensive list of what those professionals would encompass?
And that would be working with Alberta Healthcare Services and RPAP, in connection with RPAP as well.
Yeah.
And looking at what the other committees in Alberta have done.
Exactly, so I just wanna make sure that we're clear on that.
Councillor Ald?
Randy's comment about whether or not we need to have elected officials on that. If we don't, and we're not gonna be a part of it, then we really have no say in how they run that committee or society. So let's kind of make a change.
I still personally think it is beneficial to have elected officials on there. Just because, you know, we do have the clinic as well. We do have an interest. But Councillor Narang, Councillor Alderson?
I think it's more important that we have elected officials on that committee than it is that we have representatives from the industries that stand to benefit from somebody coming or not coming to Rocky Mountain. And maybe, I don't know, I'll just say, I don't know that if we change it to that comprehensive model of attracting all healthcare professionals, if necessarily we should have doctors on the committee. Because it's sort of feels like a bit of a conflict, but I could be wrong in that, but it would be like having massage therapists, and I think it needs to be more representative of the community's needs, not the needs of.
I also think it's beneficial to keep a doctor on that committee because they also do know, but maybe we add other positions for other professionals. Like maybe we have another representative that would represent nurses or a physiotherapist or, you know, or any of the other specialties, so professionals.
Yeah, I guess if we were to spread it out that way too, would be better.
Councillor Fraser and then Councillor Phillips.
Would it make
Oh,
sense to
Councillor
have
Anderson.
a representative for each type of health professional we were looking at recruiting? Because if I'm a physiotherapist, maybe I'm looking at different things and there's different, I guess, attributes of the community I'm looking for. Different places to, I guess, where the physiotherapists hang out. I think having a perspective from who we're trying to attract is important.
Yeah, that's true.
And again, it goes back to looking at the way other committees have now gone. Perhaps there's no point in us
I think that's
reinventing the
key.
wheel.
If other areas are doing that, I think that is important, and we're really just having a conversation of maybes and what ifs.
And it's very important to take into consideration the advice of the RPAP representative, because she speaks with all of the committees in the area, so. Councillor Phillips, Councillor Alderson.
I agree, we still want doctor representation on there just to get their input for sure. To Councillor Fraser's idea of adding more healthcare professionals, I would say yes to a certain amount, keeping in mind that you don't want that community to get so large that you can't make a decision on anything. But I also think even more now we want council representation on there because it is going in a different direction. We want to make sure it's going in the right direction. If we take council representation off of there, I think it could take on a line of its own. We want to make sure that our taxpayer dollars.
Well, we're funding it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we're
yeah,
funding
it's
it.
supposed to plug us along there.
Councillor Alderson.
No, it's been said, it's good.
Okay. Councillor Brown.
Just a couple of points. See, the fact that the clinic, which is a business, is involved in it complicates our association with it as well, because we have we're doing business on both sides of the fence, as it were. So that's that comment. The second thing is that we have to be careful about how many representatives sit on that committee, because if we took one from every trade that's out there, we would have a huge, and the committee right now is already, in my humble opinion, very big, but is it big enough? That's a question that needs to be asked.
But there's also a lot of work that is done on that committee. So, you know, by some of those volunteers, and I think that's key, we need that in this area. I would really keep our letter based on getting advice from RPAP and seeing how other committees are run and follow that. But I think our letter then would go to the society, asking them to reach out to RPAP and saying that we would like to see this be reconsidered, not just a physician recruitment committee, but a healthcare professional recruiting outlet, and see how then we can get information on how best to do that. Councillor Fraser, Councillor Narang?
Just so we are thinking about options, if this goes and they say there's absolutely no way, we're very, very busy doing physician recruitment, only physician recruitment, would we entertain the idea of if there's a physician recruitment committee, having a healthcare professional recruitment committee that's separate? I think the opinion of the doctors is important, but if that's not the direction that society wants to go, would it make sense to have a separate committee?
Okay, Councillor Narang? Councillor Thomas?
No, I'll hold my comments until after the letter.
I think we should have one committee doing everything, opposed to two committees, basically duplicating services and not knowing what each other is doing. I think to have one would be much more beneficial.
What we can do is ask,
Yeah,
we'll see what the response is, and then we can decide where to go from there.
well, and stress that we are the only committee that has not transformed into this type of a committee. And it's proven beneficial in other communities, so I think we do need to look at that trend. So I guess, did you have another point?
Yeah, well, I'm kind of waffling a bit, but we're in a time right now where everybody's catching up to us. Rocky Mountain House at one point in time was kind of leading the pack in physician recruitment and retention. And I would say for the last 3 years anyway, we've kind of been treading water, and everybody else is catching up to us, playing the same game we're playing. We're not being innovative enough in how we approach things, and value for your money is never more important than it is now. So I think in the proof is in the pudding that we're the last municipality to get on board with the professional healthcare. So I think we don't really have a strategy on how we're doing things. We're being reactive to what is required of us as opposed to being proactive or just active. So I think it's a bigger problem or a bigger discussion than we're going to be able to have here today.
Okay. So we'll start with sending the letter first to the society and go from there. So just a motion to send physician recruitment. Intention.
Oh, go ahead.
Councillor Auld,
I think that's motion.
do you have that, Renee? You're good?
Yes, I do, thank you.
Is everybody clear on that motion? Okay, all in favor of that motion? And that's carried. Thank you. How are we doing for time? Does anybody want to take a break or? Yeah? Okay. It is 2:23. We're going to call for a 5-minute
to recess.
It is 2:34 and I'll call the meeting back to order. We'll go on to 8.2, the COVID financial forecast, and back to Ms. Finland. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Dave Council. I'm gonna go through this in a bit more detail just because it was a fairly complex process. But again, when the pandemic happened in March and there was a nationwide shutdown of numerous services, Rocky Mountain House was impacted. We did follow all the guidelines and mandates that were issued by the government of Alberta, and so this is providing a financial forecast on the steps that we took earlier in the year. I did include a copy of the CMOH order that basically, the biggest impact was number 2, the public recreational facilities that were shut down, and that impacted much of our recreation, and the gyms, swimming pools, arenas, museums, community centers, and play centers were all shut down. So, under the financial section, the summary of what I'm going to talk about is that we're forecasting the impact of the changes we made is going to be approximately $393,000 deficit for the year is what we're forecasting right now. It is a forecast. There's a lot of moving parts in the budget, and I really focused strictly on the big impacts that we could identify. I do think there's other areas of the budget that we'll see, I'm gonna say savings in, but I without doing a really big, involve all the directors and managers, I mean, there's a lot of spending, say, that's been reduced because we're not operating at full capacity. But then on the flip side, then we're doing other things where we're doing deep cleans, so I thought I'm just gonna leave those types of things because hopefully they'll shake out, hopefully we'll have some savings that we'll see. So the main areas, and I'm gonna talk through each of the sections, because there is some savings in administration, or increased costs in administration, and then recreation and culture had the biggest impact. 327,000. So when we looked at the impact when they announced the COVID, the major areas that we focused on when we did the closures was, one, providing financial relief to the residents, and again, we just looked at that today, but through delayed deadlines and forgiveness of interest and penalties. We looked at safety protocols and business plans for staff working throughout the town. We looked at the closure of facilities, mostly in recreation and community halls, and how they reduced revenue and the staffing was impacted. We looked at financial measures that part of it was looking at the need to maintain staff for when we were going to reopen versus reducing expenditures. And I mean, we're still in that balancing act because right now, I think the recreation is going to be at phase 3 or is it phase 4? So we're still kind of sitting waiting to see what's going to happen and how this is going to go forward.
That's a good question on the recreation and culture. Is that because of loss of revenues? Is that what?
Yeah, and I'll touch on that. But, you know, we want to lay off staff, but we also want to make sure that if they give us the notification that we can open, that we have some staff retention and that we're not going into full-blown recruitment because everybody's dissipated. We're fortunate and Rocky's a smaller town, so we have to keep moving, but it's still an issue. And then I also did, there's a section in the back where I tried to look at the cash flow on a real macro basis, but I mean, in some of these estimates, I don't even know how to approach estimating, are we gonna collect the same amount of taxes in July that we're gonna, as this year as last year? Those are such unknown numbers right now. So I did look at the cash flows. So the financial relief, and I just touched on each one, so we did forgive the property taxes and penalties. The recreation facilities were closed, and the closure involved refunding deposits and any payment for services, so if there was swimming lessons, et cetera, those were refunded. We reassigned staffing wherever possible. The directors and the CAO, we had several meetings back in March and early April, really looking at what we could do. There's both the business side of staffing and there's also, your staff for your colleagues and your families, so you're trying to balance that. We looked at what we could do in terms of project work because the facilities were closed. Was there deep cleaning? Because cleaning is a huge COVID-19 issue. Was there deep cleaning that we could do? Was there capital projects that we could pull forward and utilize the staff in that manner? Because we have this window of opportunity to get work done that maybe couldn't be done. And then if there was absolutely no work, then we looked at temporary layoffs. So the forecast was based on that. And I show a summary of the general revenues. So the reduction to education taxes that was announced by the province, that had a zero impact on our budget because we had factored in a COLA increase to the educational taxes, but it's a wash because you've got the revenue and then we submit it to the government. So that was no impact. We did estimate 3 months worth of utility tax penalties, so we reduced that. Again, and if I continue doing forecasts, that would be a further reduction. And then we looked at the amounts that we charged last year for tax penalties. So sorry, that should be August and December. So there's 2 tax penalties that we charge and we're gonna waive those penalties. So the total for those was, last year was about $60,000. So the impact on revenue is about $66,000. On the staffing side, there was basically 5 departments that were impacted, and we either looked at change of duties or in last resort layoff. It affected the pool, arena, guest services, programming and fitness activities, the community center, and when I say the library, I mean the janitorial portion of the library. We don't get that stuff. So we went through, and not all the summer students were hired back. We had 12 that we were going to recruit. We brought the 6 back that were from prior years, and we used the other 6 positions to deploy existing staff into. The revenue forecast, basically what we did was we pulled out the revenue for the facilities that were shut down from whatever they were to 0 for the months of March to August. In discussion with the CAO, we put September through December, we put 25% back in for September and 50% for November and December. Again, these numbers are estimates because, this is something that's never happened before, so it's really difficult to say, well, we think it's gonna look like this. But if we are able to open our doors, we may have tremendous response, which is great, but we just don't know what kind of uptake there'll be once we get to reopen. So those are the, basically the basic principles of what we used. Just on the staffing side, there were 7 staff redeployed to finance, planning, and public works. There was temporary layoffs of 36 staff. The majority of the first round of layoffs were junior pool staff. So a lot of them were high school students and they ranged anywhere from like 2 hours a week and up. So we really tried to be cognizant of that, but it was the pool, fitness, and guest services that were impacted. And a lot of the custodial and arena operators we've retained because we did major cleaning and that kind of stuff. So in summary, the arena, the reduced revenue is $200,000. The reduced salaries is 33. So the cost what we're absorbing for closing the arena is 33,000, or 166,000. The pool, we're looking at 48,000. Guest services, programming and fitness was 83, community center 35, and the library, so there was savings of, and the library was 6,000. So overall, we reduced revenue by 595,000. We reduced salaries by 267, which gives us a projected loss of 327 for the year. Just a note, I did calculate the impact, but I haven't included it. Typically, the county pays 50% of the deficit. Now, we have an existing agreement with them. They've budgeted for it. So this is something that we may want to discuss with them. I don't know what your position would be on it. If they were to say, whatever your deficit is, we'll cover 50%, there may be some additional funds coming our way, but we don't want to assume that. So I just assumed that they would pay what their original budgeted amount was.
So should we have that discussion? Should we contact Mr. Emmons, or how should we do that? Should I make contact?
Yeah, your worship, I could initiate that with Mr. Emmons.
Okay,
Go from there.
okay, thanks.
So we will explore that. So overall, then, based on the, the revenue reductions and then the salary and revenue adjustments, we're looking at a projection of 393,000. And I'm just going to talk briefly about now, that is covered because we took the surplus from last year and put it into the accumulated surplus, so there is funds available. So in essence, it won't have an impact on our operations. And I do think the spending throughout the town is significantly reduced, there's a lot less activity, so we may see some additional savings.
Councilor Fraser, did you have a question?
I was wondering if it's possible for us to make use of the federal wage subsidy. I know that some of the political parties had applied for it for their staff, and I know that for elected officials it doesn't apply, but if it applied to political party staff, would it not apply to staff?
Because they're societies, they're charitable organizations.
Yeah. Okay. I did look several months ago, I did think we qualified to swim away, and I think the limit is $40,000. But I'll certainly double check, but I wasn't aware that we qualified. Just looking at the forecast, and I'm just gonna go through the graphs really quickly, and the blue line is 2020 and the green bars are 2019. So I wanted to just kind of take a look at our receipts. So our receipts are down in the area of property taxes and utilities, absolutely. It was a real pleasant surprise when I looked at our trade receivable receipts. They're actually up 400,000. I have to give some kudos to the finance department. I don't know that it's myself, but our billings and everything are back on track and they're going out on time. So we're actually helping carry some of that load in terms of that we've got our receivable billings are on. So the net impact cash flow wise on revenue is $15,000 from last year. So we're in really good cash position as far as that goes. When I looked at the payables, our payables now part of it is there's a timing difference. So what happens in March and April, we're going to see it in a lag, and the summer months are going to be the bigger months where there's less revenues coming in, especially from pool. But May, our payables were actually up. So I'm looking at that and I'm going, okay, we're doing more capital projects, so that's probably what's impacting that. But the net payroll is down cumulatively year to date by 270,000. So we are seeing a reduction in the payables. So the combined payments, we're showing cumulative change there. So basically, I just wanted to look at that because it shows we are not going into a really bad operating cash flow position, so we're pretty stable. I'll continue to monitor it over the summer, and when we bring the June quarterly statements, we'll try to have a look at this as well and provide you with more information.
Great. Does anybody have any more questions for Betty?
Oh, I guess
Councilor Ryan?
when will we, because I know that you sit down with the directors at budget time, is that when we'll start to see where the reduced activities will be impacting that $300,000? Or just get the year end, it'll kind of come out.
Well, you'll start to see it in the quarterly statements, so when we do June, because that'll have all the actual expenditures up to the end of June. That should start to show us, you know, if there's reduced or a different type of expenditures. I think you will see more in cleaning supplies and that kind of thing.
Any other questions? I just want to say I appreciate this report. It's great, and I'm hoping a lot of public will look at this as well and give us a good idea.
And we'll continue to monitor this if we think that we need to bring up, like, update the forecast as more information becomes available to us. Kind of have a clear picture of what's happening this year. We'll try to
I like the fact you made it very easy to read and follow.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Try to keep it simple as nobody likes to.
No, and that's exactly it. That's the best way. Easy to read for everybody.
Good, thank you.
And our website too, right? Like it's on there. Okay. No other questions? So we have a recommended alternative in front of us. Councilor Alderson?
Motion that council accept the 2020 COVID-19 financial forecast as information.
Thank you. All in favor of that motion? And that's carried. So we'll move on to number 8.3, graduation support. And that's good. Mr. Clement.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council.
Good afternoon.
Back today just to provide a little bit of update since my presentation on May the 12th. Had further conversations with the schools and in particular the West Central High School. They seem to be the furthest along with their graduation plans. And I've included in my report from Stacey Wigley, the principal of the West Central, so their proposal of their graduation and what it would look like with an outdoor commencement on June the 26th, starting at noon, going to approximately 2 o'clock. It'll be a drive-through type of an event. They've been in touch with Alberta Health Services, sharing their plans with them. Reached out to myself and in response, I've reached out to the other directors in our team to talk about, in particular, the parade and what that would look like. As outlined, they've got some details as to how $1,000 per vehicle, one family per vehicle, and the spacings and how that would look like. They're providing a photographer that's going to take pictures as they graduate across the stage. They can't physically hand them certificates as part of the existing EHS guidelines, but they're going to live stream the event. So part of perhaps what we could do to support them is also repost that. That's a conversation with Laura and how that would look, and sharing that information with the community about their process. And then looking at the parade, actually I think there's a little error there. They talked about starting the parade at 4 o'clock. Talking with Mr. Schrader and Mr. Slade, about the start time being it's a Friday, a long weekend. I know that AT had some concerns about closing or temporary closing Highway 11A, and I think at this point, my conversations, and Brandon could perhaps speak a little bit to his conversations with Alberta Transportation. I think we've determined the route is going to stay on the north side of Highway 11A, and we proposed a route to the schools this morning and talking with Mr. Coles from the West Central. They're fine with it. We choose a route and we'll go with that. So I think the idea of selecting a route that will allow for people to travel around the neighborhoods. We're anticipating as many as 150 vehicles. There's 112 graduates from West Central, 38 or 39 graduates from St. Dominic's. Those are the two schools that have expressed interest in participating in the parade. When you throw in a couple of additional vehicles, including perhaps a town vehicle, CPOs, looking at that, you could have 150 vehicles, touring along. So, I guess we would encourage all the participants, they can decorate their vehicles. And I think one of the big things is once we determine that route, after today, whatever direction council gives, we can start the promotion of that route to the community so people are aware. One of the concerns, I guess, is doing that parade. If there's people out and about wanting to line the streets to sort of congratulate whatever's ensuring that they're all practicing social distancing and those types of things. When we looked at the parade being one thing, and we were also approached by the chamber with regard to perhaps doing a collaborative effort on matters to recognize all the graduates. And I talked with Michelle Heatheringham from the chamber. She sort of had a thought of approaching businesses to sponsor the banners. As it turns out, between the credit union and the co-op, you probably have noticed the banners that are on the credit union. The credit union was responsible for that, recognizing all the graduates, not only in the town, but as well as the county. And it's my understanding that the credit union co-op have come together and they've got individual banners for every graduate. So that's, so again, the chambers scaled back on that venture, and we've got a couple of businesses in town that have set up to really recognize the graduates. So, so in a nutshell, I guess, from our town's perspective, how can we support, again, posting graduation recognition on our town website, on the electronic side, social media. We're working on assisting the schools in the grad parade. I think we've pretty much come up with a route that will get out there. We mentioned, again, part of the social media and advertise about just the communities coming out to support the grads. Here's the route. If you're coming out, decorate your yards, your garage doors. If you're out on the sidewalks, you're cheering on the graduates. I don't anticipate 150 vehicles doing the route. It may take an hour. They're not going to be going at a pace of a normal parade float as they're driving about. I mean, they're still going to be driving a reasonable speed. But, the one thing that we did have to look in, and the town doesn't usually sponsor parades, usually other organizations apply to the town to host a parade. One of the things we looked at is if the town were to sort of, as part of our recognitions, we would sponsor the parade. It is included in our current insurance that we can do that. One of the things is all the parade participants have to provide us with proof of insurance. So reaching out to the schools, they're willing to work with us on that, even if it's a photograph of the pink card of every card. So they're willing to help us with that. Make sure that component, as far as the insurance thing goes, I think we could cross any of those hurdles. Yeah, so unless there's any questions that the council maybe has with regard to, or suggestions or other ideas for how we can support.
I'm curious, the last couple of years, we've done a luncheon for the graduates. I know there's no way we could do a luncheon, but is there some other way we can do something for them from the town? As well as support the parade.
Maybe later in summer, hopefully more restrictions left. It would be great to have like a chocolate corner roast or something. I have no clue, but something cool.
I don't know. I'm just throwing things out there, like a pizza voucher. They could do a pizza with their family, I guess. I don't know. Do we explore anything like that, or do we just say?
Well, I don't know that we have anything set aside in a budget, at this point.
Your worship, we do, that's under council's budget, as opposed to luncheon. I would have to verify the amount, that's.
Yeah, because we've done it the last 2 years, so.
I should say that St. Dominic's has rescheduled. They were scheduled for the 25th, 26th for the graduation ceremonies at the Woosopet. They've rescheduled for September, with Bryn as an option of doing something more formal.
Okay.
At this point, we don't know. As I guess we'll wait on the government to decide of what phase 3 looks like.
Right. Councillor Fraser?
Is it being held in the rec parking lot? Like, what's the planned location?
It's going to be in the parking lot from the school. Yeah.
And is there a rain plan?
Not at this point.
I'm thinking grad gowns and tuxes and suits. Is there something going on at the North Saskatchewan River Park that day?
But where would they go out there?
Well, just the bleachers are covered, which I guess they can all park on the field, but it doesn't cover them. They have to do it under the bleachers.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're still restricted by outdoor groups of no more than 50. The drive-through thing is something different because they're staying in vehicles.
Yeah. Did you?
No,
Okay. So is there,
I haven't broached that topic of rain delays or whatever with, the parade can still happen, rain or shine.
Yeah, yeah.
The procession across the stage for the graduates might be a little different. I know St. Dominic's is going to participate in the parade, but they're looking at a photo booth option or something for the graduates on the Saturday, so not doing the same day as West Central.
okay, is there a desire to look at an alternative to the luncheon, or?
I think if the schools are trying to do something fall in the way of a formal gathering, I think that's maybe our opportunity to go back in and help, see if we can do something to assist. I think until then, we're at the mercy of AHS to do
Yeah.
anything.
But would they do something that day? I mean, they're going to go to a, well, I guess they're not technically supposed to have a party either.
So we can't be seen as promoting that.
No, pardon?
We can't be seen as promoting that.
No, that's what I'm saying. Pizza.
I think we're at a loss
like
though, because,
restaurant box?
well, I was thinking along those lines, but like we have a budget for luncheon,
Yeah,
which is really way
Different.
cheaper than giving every single grad a voucher for a meal like that. I think that would, budgetary might go give me $4 or something, like really, without discounting.
it was more than that last year.
But it's cheaper, what I mean,
Oh,
is to
for
feed
sure.
them as a.
Yeah, for sure, as a group.
If we were to break that dollar amount that we budgeted for all the grads.
If they're doing a drive-by grad, could we do a drive-by burger? Like, I don't, because like, we were in a line and we put together and handed it to, would that be allowed? They're allowed to do drive-by at McDonald's.
Are you feeding just the graduate or are you feeding the family?
That's the difference too,
That's
yeah.
different.
And I would think if they're not allowed to hand a diploma out on stage, I would for sure think a burger probably is not going to be allowed.
Well, I guess it would be a food truck option, right? It'd be like, it's similar to a drive-through, but there's the whole family in the car and,
Yeah.
sorry, you might be hungry, but you're not getting a burger.
That's true, no,
From a
That's what-
financial perspective, one of the things that Stacy from the West Central indicated that some of the students, because of COVID, there is a cost that they would normally pay for graduation of $45 per as part of their graduation fee. Some of them, I think, may be struggling for that, others maybe not. So as you say, there's a way from a financial perspective that maybe graduates who could benefit from that, but again, it wouldn't hit all graduates.
Yeah, I think we're looking at doing something as a group for all to recognize their commitment to the last 12 years. Councillor Alderson?
Yeah, I'd like to land, or sort of Councillor Phillips' idea that maybe we just hold off just like the schools, and if for some reason, who knows, there could be more waves, there might not even be physical school still in September. You know, you never know, but if that's the case, maybe we can look at coupons, but I would like to personally kind of do something like we did before,
Yeah.
whether that's in the school or in the community center, if we can.
Yeah,
Great.
okay. Councillor Fraser?
All right, I'm still stuck on the food idea. I'm wondering if, we know we've got several local food trucks in the area, if we contacted them and we could put something perhaps towards the food. And anything over and above that for their family, they could purchase, but it would also allow some of the people who have food trucks and businesses to also participate and get some time out.
Councillor Phillips and Councillor Alderson?
And maybe this is what I can throw out there is if school gets back to normal operations in September, maybe we can do some type of a welcome to school and honor grads at the same time in September once the school's open. Again, once phase 3 happens or schools are open, that's also subject to that.
Well, I'm not against feeding hungry teenagers. I think the point of the whole us being there was to have that community with
That's right.
town and council. So I think that loses that magic to it. That was the point of that to me. Because I'm sure we could just send a coupon, but to me, it's not the same.
No.
Councillor Brown?
I'm on the side of holding off
Yeah.
till starting.
Okay, so what do we,
So I have two recommended alternatives for council's consideration there.
what is? Councillor Phillips?
I'll make a motion that council support the 2020 graduation recognition through website and social media communication.
Okay, and then I guess the other one's a second motion. Okay. Everybody clear on that motion? All in favor of that motion? And that's carried. Councillor
Make the
Fraser?
next one if you'd like.
Sorry.
I have a question.
Okay, Councillor Ryan?
Can we include that the town car will participate? Is this the resolution is just about helping to plan? Is there, we need a motion to participate in the parade using the town vehicle?
Sorry, I should have included that.
Okay.
Now, can we,
Second one?
with the distancing? No, we're masks.
Worship, I think our peace officers are actually leading the parade, is that correct?
Yeah, we're gonna have one patrol vehicle in front, one in the rear of the parade.
I don't mind driving, I'm doing a recorded message. Like Friday, I think we're gonna work on a recorded message.
On a megaphone?
Yeah, no, for their website, yeah.
Do I need to amend my motion?
Okay, so
That's the second one, we already dealt with
It's
yours.
just not in it though. The town vehicle's not in.
You're right, the second motion you're looking at.
Yeah.
And Councillor Fraser, who made that motion now? Councillor Fraser did. And we're just adding the town car in there.
I will still make that motion. Car not, yeah.
Is everybody clear on that motion?
Everything's so hard
No.
to take.
It seems difficult
Maybe we're
today.
back to that, please, I'm confused.
Okay. Renee, do you have that? It says basically be it resolved that the council instruct administration to assist in the planning of the 2020 graduation parade on Friday, June 26th.
You could probably strike the insurance because I think I've answered that question. That is covered under existing insurance.
Your worship, no, I think we have to be careful there because our insurance covers a parade on the streets. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Schwader, but if we don't have control over the parade, then the school division would have to get their own insurance. And what this resolution is that we would compensate for that. Versus, because if it falls on our insurance, we have to actually have control of the
Is that why we're leading the parade? Like,
The peace officers.
I think we are still actually working that out with the school division. Correct. Because either they obtain the insurance and then, you know, what we're saying to council is that we reimburse them that. That's our contribution, part of our contribution, which is probably around $400.
Okay,
Or if we work it out that we actually control the parade, organize it, then it would fall under our current insurance. So
I think
that's-
it's almost better to have them, their insurance, we just pay the insurance. And they organize it.
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. I think it's hands
We just
hands off.
build
Yeah.
insurance, yeah.
Then that changes the motion, right? Because this is to instruct administration to assist in the planning and cover the cost of insurance.
Yeah, so that would cover it. If they got the insurance, then we would just reimburse them for that.
Right. So then we're not planning, or we still are assisting?
I think we're not planning, we're assisting in the
Okay.
planning, but we're not controlling.
Okay.
What was your motion, Mary? Something about a car.
All right. So I move that council instruct administration to assist in the planning of 2020 graduation parade on Friday, June 26th. And no, I was going to say, and will include the town car and required insurance.
And cost of the insurance
Cost
required
of
to put on the parade?
insurance
To put on the parade or?
Yeah, for the parade specifically, maybe. You don't want to pay all of their insurance. Correct?
Yeah, so the town will
Yeah,
cover
we
the
don't want
cost
to
of
pay
the
all.
insurance required,
Oh,
right? So that's,
However that happens.
One more read, please.
Renee, do you have?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay, be it resolved that council instruct administration to assist in the planning of the 2020 graduation parade on Friday, June 26th, including that the town vehicle join the parade in recognition of the 2020 graduates, and that the town cover the cost of the insurance required to put on the parade.
Let's hope quick.
Wow, you got all that from all this? Pretty good.
Right.
Okay, is everybody clear on that motion? Okay, all in favor of that motion that Councillor Fraser made?
Great motion.
Wasn't it a great motion?
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodness.
Thanks to everybody in that.
Complicating everything.
Okay, so we're gonna move on 8.4 AUMA resolution, linear taxation. And who is that? And that's James Harkin too.
Your worship. So following the Maine Health Council meeting, council asked administration to do some research on previous AUMA resolutions regarding linear taxation and draft a resolution for council. So in my research, I did not find a resolution for linear taxation. However, there was a linear tax symposium that was done in 2016. So basically looked at the information that was provided in that package. So there was the letter to the minister regarding the recommendations that came out of that tax symposium. Some of the background information, there was also some support information from the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers that was included in there. Basically took that information and put the resolutions that are included in the package together. It was difficult to find kind of more recent information on linear taxation sharing, because most of the information that's available, you know, in the last few years is more around some of the companies that have not paid their property taxes. So there was information on that. There was a little bit of information to the government changed, I think it was the tax rate for linear taxation, that it was reduced. So that was the information that I found, but I put together what I could find, and drafted the resolution from there. In the policy through the AUMA, that like one of their resolutions policy, there is a requirement to have like a seconder on the resolutions. So one of our own resolutions with respect to the linear taxation is for council to give us some direction as well on municipalities they'd like us to contact that would be perhaps interested in being a seconder.
So I have a question now. I think now with our letter that we've just sent off to Mr. Madhu, it's regarding regionalization of the area. Are we muddying the waters now by looking at this, and perhaps we need to more focus on what our letter has stated instead of just the linear tax? I think we need to include more in that.
Or follow it, but
Yes, rather than just this, because now we're asking just for share of linear tax, whereas the ask of regionalization is a far greater, more complex idea. So do we change our focus? Mr. Alderson?
I think not necessarily, because there's no guarantee regionalization will occur, and this is an ask if regionalization doesn't occur. So I think at this point in time, there's still two different things, because if regionalization occurs, this won't even be a concern.
Good point. Councillor Narang, then Councillor.
Yeah, I agree with Jason. I think that the AUMA voice is for, it's across provincial province wide, whereas our letter, our ask for regionalization is more isolated to certain areas. I mean, mind you, we are sort of speaking with a common voice with other municipalities, but I think it is separate. I think this is it. If we don't get regionalization, then this is what will need to happen.
Yep, and I agree as well that the two separate issues and in logical progression, this one should be placed.
Okay. Councillor Phillips?
Completely agree with this.
So we have some alternatives in front of us.
Yeah, I was just curious, what are the municipalities that would make sense to reach out to when we're giving the motion? I know there's certain ones that we're dealing with similar issues, so that they would make more sense.
Can we work on that?
Your worship, yeah. Absolutely.
Okay, because I think there are a few that I would approach and get full support.
Right. Did they have to be part of this motion? Looks like it might be.
We don't have to.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, we can come back with that one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, your worship, because you always look to submit a resolution to AUMA with multiple municipalities listed on it.
Yeah.
Right, take away the department or seconder, right, so there was between like 3 or 4 municipalities submitted this resolution together, right, and it carries more weight.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I know we're trying to line up a teleconference with the CAO and myself. CAOs and mayors of the mayors of Drayton Valley, Whitecourt, Hinton, Edson, and us. So
That
Speak
gives us
conversation.
more, just guiding them to do that, doesn't need to be a resolution.
right, we just have to work on the resolution. So basically the first one then.
I'll make the motion for that, we have a discussion on that. Council, I'll make a motion that council move to submit the linear tax resolution to the AUMA by the June 30th, 2020 deadline.
Any more discussion on that? Does it need anything else from us? Okay, all in favor of that motion? And that's carried. Thank you.
Okay, your worship.
Now we'll move on to 8.5. Yeah, the Rocky Mountain Homes Municipal Detachment Multi-Year Financial Plan.
Thank you, your worship. So the local detachment has submitted their multi-year financial plan to the town, which is a requirement under our contract with them. That plan submitted to town indicates a request for 1 officer and 1 clerk for 2021, and then another additional officer and another clerk for 2022. So this the financial plan went to commission for review. And the police commission is actually making a recommendation to council that a letter be sent to K Division because there is an inequality of officers, I guess, for municipal versus provincial. Because right now we have 16 officers on the provincial side, 14 in town. So like the ratio for officers in town is 1 for 490 some residents, but that goes up quite a bit in the provincial side. So the detachment as a whole is seeing an increase or demand for additional officers. It really should be on the provincial side versus the municipal side. So what the commission recommended to council was that a letter be sent to K Division kind of expressing that that additional officers come from the province for the detachment.
Councilor Phillips?
I know I sound like a broken record on the population of police officer. Dean had alluded to our contribution of 474 for population per police officer. The provincial average is 746, and Clearwater County is about 950 plus. So just to get some perspective, that's why this ask is coming in there. It's that slanted.
And I'd still like clarification as well on our detachment and how that's going to factor out in the long run, which municipality is it just going to solely be one municipality footing the bill for that? Because I think those are big questions and huge financial impacts to our communities. So definitely something we can talk to K Division about as well. Councilor Phillips?
And, also with the increased ask for trooper officers over the next few years, one other thing that was brought up is with the influx of money from being asked of counties and other smaller municipalities, that we may get more officers through that possibly, which would escalate the need for a new detachment. And especially if we put all on the municipal side, that just makes more of a problem for us. As opposed to being on the provincial side, it just makes a better argument for us.
We just can't accept this ask without a better explanation. And, any other questions on that? Councilor Phillips?
If there's no other questions, then I'll make a motion. Make a motion that council send a letter to K Division regarding the Rocky Mountain House Detachment multi-year financial plan, April 1st, 2021, providing them with statistical background information request that the province be responsible to supply the requested positions for the Rocky Mountain House Detachment.
All in favor of that motion? And that's carried. Thank you. We'll move on to number 9, Town of Edson Charging Station Network. Who am I gonna turn that over to? Who wants to accept my gift?
Sure. So your worship, the town of Edson is asking council to participate in the Northwest Alberta Electric Vehicle Charging Network, which is basically to have charging stations in select municipalities in our region. It goes like Whitecourt to us and so forth. They are asking council to use some seed funding at a shared total of 30,000. So that would be depending on how many municipalities opt into this. So more likely probably around $5,000 for us, I would guess, with the municipalities that are the less of all municipalities CC on the letter opt in. But I think it's a good opportunity for council or for the town to be part of this.
I agree, and we've had this discussion when I talked with the mayors, and they believe it is a huge tourism booster. And I think Highway 93 as well. You say the crossing, that makes it then an electric kind of a triangle going throughout. So there are no dead spots then. So, Councilor Alderson, did you have your?
Yeah, I was going to say it fits in our vision that this council's been looking at. especially if it's reduced down to $5,000. My question was, if this was to go through, where would we envision putting that, kind of like by the museum or something, or does it go a gas bar, the voting system? How does that work?
Yeah, your worship, so they're actually in the letter, they are asking for us to identify a potential site. I would assume the museum would probably be the logical choice, that's kind of our visitor hub.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Okay. Awesome.
Councilor Fraser, did you have your hand up?
I was just saying that it would be nice, I know we were discussing with mayors of those towns about how we could kind of group our tourism together. This might be a really interesting element to have, like the green circle, because you said it was a
Yeah.
closed loop. It might be a way to brand that, to get people to kind of take a second look.
I wonder if Jasper has been approached, because that would make sense.
Your worship, the letter is CC'd to Jasper.
Okay, yes, okay, good. So then that would include all of 93 then. How about, yeah, okay. I could go crazy on this. I love it. I think it's great. Councilor Phillips?
I think this is a great way to attract tourism from Edmonton and Calgary markets, because that's where the bulk of these vehicles will be coming from. And we can market ourselves as a destination to stop and charge. They will have reason to come here.
Yeah, no, I agree. So I'm just looking for somebody to craft a resolution.
Worship, would you like me to read one?
Sure.
Okay. Be it resolved that council instruct administration to send a letter of support for the regional collaborative initiative for a Northwest Alberta electric vehicle charging.
I'll make that motion. Any other questions or discussions on that motion? All in favor of that motion? That's carried, thank you. 9.2, we have the rain barrel inquiry. Who am I turning that?
Sure, your worship.
Okay.
So your worship, we received this email, it's just a request of council to consider a program for rebates on our citizens purchase rain barrels. No further, it's just a request. I mean, it might be something council wants to consider part of this, the strategic planning, service level discussions in the fall.
Sure, because we'd be too late probably for this season anyways, but, maybe we could get a special bulk order buy. And, I don't know. Certainly worth looking into. Councilor Fraser?
Or even if it's similar to our composter program, if you've got the photo and the receipt, I don't know do you know what Red Deer's rebate is?
I am not sure, we could research that.
Phillips and Councilor Alderson?
Yeah, I would like to see a little bit of research done on what other communities have in place, what kind of programs they have, and then have it brought to our strategic plan and see if that, it truly fits into our, one of our strategic goals. So just to see what the financial impact would be.
Councilor Alderson?
Same, because I'm not saying I'm against doing a program like that, but I mean, just based on the letter, there's a savings already, so that would be the incentive.
To save.
So maybe do we do rebate, but maybe we don't, because it would just make financial sense to go get one anyhow. So anyhow.
But, and I agree with that, and that's where I was thinking though, could we get a better deal on rain barrels if we bulk buy? And maybe that's what we look at instead.
There's savings already.
Yeah, we look at, you can buy one from us, but. maybe
Or
this
if you
is-
put your order in by this time.
Yes,
So then we're not
Right.
warehousing a bunch of rain barrels, but if we say by whatever date, we're putting in our bulk order, let us know.
that's right, and we could work with then the stores in town. And,
I think we have this figured out, it's good.
yeah.
Great.
Okay, so I guess motion to bring this back to the strategic planning session in the fall with more information. Okay. Making that motion. Councilor Alderson, all in favor of that motion? And that's carried, thank you. 9.3 Pioneer Center request for a letter of support. Is that
Yeah, your worship, so we received a letter from the Pioneer Center looking for council to provide provide a letter of support for a community initiative program grant for operating costs. As the letter states, the senior center is, through this COVID being shut down, is struggling for some funding. The province did open up this initiative for operating costs this year in assistance of that, so they're just looking for a letter of support from council.
I totally support this. So just looking for a motion for somebody to make that. Councillor Ryan?
Yeah, I'll make it. I would send a letter of support to the Pioneer Center and support their application for this funding.
All in favor of that motion? And that's carried. Thank you. Interprovincial, we'll move on to 9.4, interprovincial nomination of the North Saskatchewan River for the Canadian Heritage River System. Mr. Kraus, is that you?
Sure, Your Worship. So previously, council adopted a resolution to send a letter of support for the North Saskatchewan River to be on the Heritage River. Part of that resolution was that the town asked the county if they would like to do a joint letter. That has been reviewed by county council, and at this point in time, they're not prepared to support that initiative until they have further information back to them. So we're bringing it back to council just for verification if council would like us to send that letter of support without the county on board.
So the river is designated heritage until it crosses the park boundary. And then it's not designated heritage.
That's my understanding, Your Worship, yes.
What does that designation mean exactly?
Well, we looked into that before.
To me, I recall being in name only, because like
Yes.
we still have control of our river.
Yes.
Because that was my concern, it's like, so what does that mean, it's out of our hands,
Right.
anything we want to do, and they said no. So it just sounds like a fancy title.
Yeah.
To me.
To designate the whole
Symbolic,
river.
yeah.
It's all, that's basically what it is. It's
Okay,
symbolic.
that's what I'm wondering.
Councillor Ald?
Well, that was kind of my thing, but it's a clear mind that it's, they're changing the name and down the road, it's anybody's, but I'm just not sold on it as symbolic.
Yeah. Councillor Fraser?
If it's a heritage river and it's attached to a park, I'm just wondering if that would allow us to leverage, I guess all of their print materials. Would we then appear on the list of heritage rivers? Would we appear on New Alberta, wherever these are, put in their.
So our designation portion would be from the park boundary to where?
Your Worship, Smoky Lake is leading the initiative on this, but I would imagine it's the river throughout Alberta.
Right, but so are we just designating a portion?
No, I think the designation would be for the North Saskatchewan River to be a heritage river.
Only designated by us?
No, this is.
I'm just not getting it.
We're just nominating.
We're just nominating, I'm on the site now, it's
Oh, okay, so what are you saying there?
well, there's like 7 steps, but it says after designation, after river is designated to the system, an annual report is prepared each year describing changes, improvements, and threats to the values for which the river was designated. River-based events and stewardship actions are also listed in annual reports. Every 10 years, an in-depth review of the river's values is undertaken, and a monitoring report on the decade is prepared and tabled before. But there's like a 7-step process.
It sounds like some of that stuff's already part of that other.
North Saskatchewan Watershed Alliance.
And this is national.
This is national designation.
And so then I still have similar concerns just like before, like to me, it sounds like it's in the title now, but it's the same thing when you apply to become a heritage home, you lose control over certain things. I just want to know that the pros would outweigh the cons, like if we have, like Councilor Marin said, access to basically all these promotional materials, that would be a big pro. But if it's just, we have this nice title and then we lose all rights, whatever it is that we would want to do within our area, that's a big concern.
Yes, and that was the concern when it was first brought to us, for sure. Councillor Phillips?
And my concern is not just that, but should we decide to do this, but the county hasn't done it, it's kind of a new point. I mean, the county votes to do it, the river runs through both of our communities, so would we not need support from both?
I don't,
Or half of the river would be heritage.
Yes, I mean, the river kind of is in both of our backyards.
Councilor Fraser?
I'm also wondering whether it's worth it to be on federal lists in regards to federal funding. We pull our water from that river that we're at the head, and it flows through, and everybody pulls their water that lives on that river. I'm just wondering if having it deemed a heritage river might open up some federal funding, either for preservation or developments on the river, or ways to bring attention to preserving the river, just whether being on the list of federal heritage rivers might help.
Councilor Brown?
Yeah, the more we discuss it, the bigger the question becomes to me is what's the point?
And that's, I guess what I'm thinking right now, this seems like it's a really difficult conversation. So it feels like we maybe need more information before we do designate, like what does it mean for us? What do we benefit, what do we lose? Councilor Ald?
Well, that's what I was gonna say. It's monitored, and every 10 years they look at it, or 5 years they look at it, and they decide that there's too much industry going on that river. It's a heritage river, they've got control over it now. It's really, it can be very judgmental.
And Councilor Alderson, then
To me, it's one of those double-edged swords, like, if it was federal, that sounds all fine and dandy, but then you have the potential federal fingers in your pot.
Yeah.
Which is, again, not really what you want. Or maybe it is, I don't know. But to Councilor Brown's point, what is the point? Like, what is the actual point?
Well, and further to that is they're doing it for a reason, but they're not telling us.
Right.
And that's a little bit concerning.
So do we want more information yet, or?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we should get some more information on what the Canadian Heritage River System is and what it does. Like, is it an advocacy group or something for communities that have rivers going through them, or like, what is it, I don't know, because I don't know.
Well, I guess I'd like to see documentation, written documentation that guarantees that we're not, doing something that we shouldn't be doing, like tying up or restricting with federal regulations or whatever, for the provincial.
I just want to know what they're trying to achieve with what they're doing.
Yes.
And, once we know what they're trying to achieve, then we can make a decision.
Tourism or stewardship or.
But there are stewardship programs already. So,
So your worship, administration will bring back more research.
okay. Thank you, then we'll just accept this as a motion to accept this as, no motion to have admin bring back more information on designating the river as heritage. Councilor Brown?
I'll make that.
All in favor of that motion? Carried, thank you. Just looking for a motion to accept 10.1 to 10.12. As information, of course, information, okay. Councilor Alderson made that motion. All in favor of that motion? Okay, and that's carried. 11.1, any questions on my report? Okay, if none, just looking for a motion to accept. Councilor Phillips, all in favor of that motion? Carried, thank you. The councilor reports in front of me. Does anybody have any questions regarding the councilor reports? Okay, I'll make that motion to accept the councilor's reports as presented. All in favor? Carried. Moving on to 12.1, the action list. Does anybody have any questions on the action list? Okay.
The manufactured homes tax bylaw, is that going to come back in
Yes.
June yet?
Your worship, that's scheduled for June 19th.
Thank you. Any other questions? Asking for a motion to accept the action list then. Councillor Alderson, all in favor of that motion? Carried. Administrative inquiries. Automatic council meeting notifications.
Thanks, Mayor. I just wrote up a few notes after looking into it. So when we transferred to our new website provider and meeting manager, those who had subscribed did not transfer over to different platforms, and so people do need to resubscribe. I've outlined how to do it there. We have over 90 registrants already. I have to admit, it's not a feature we've been using. It is an extra administrative step that our previous platform was automatic, and so quite frankly, it wasn't part of our routine between communications and ledge services. It is now, and those who have signed up to receive council news will get an email whenever a new council agenda is published and shared. Certainly, we're already meeting our legislative notification requirements. Anyway, this is just an added way to reach our residents and property owners and business owners who may be interested. Also, the other communication piece that we've provided since I've come on board is the council highlights document that has gone out after every meeting. And quite frankly, COVID happened. And so I am backfilling those, posted about 8 in the last week, and there's I believe 6 more outstanding. But as of this week, we will be back up to normal on those emails going to all staff, as well as the media distribution list posted to our website.
And Facebook page?
Those historically haven't been posted to Facebook because they are done just on our, when a new one is posted, it comes up on our, as like a notification on our website.
I think I would like to see it posted to our Facebook page as well. It's just one more area for people to look and see.
So we can share it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Easily.
Sure. Okay. I believe, I can just add it to my checklist when I
Sure.
do those, when I send them out.
Yeah, when you add it to the website, I guess just put it to the Facebook as well, that'd be awesome. Any other questions on that?
And so as I indicated, I will also, put a few notifications out on our social media as well as through the utilities invoice, letting people know that this is a feature of our new website. It's been underused these last 4 months, but we're going to set it up.
Highlight it or something?
Yeah.
Good, that's great. Perfect, thank you.
Welcome.
Okay. So that was just for information. We don't need a motion. Any other administrative Administrative inquiries? Councillor Narang.
Just going back to what we talked about before about having some sort of policy or information around gifts in kind, and that's something that would be an administrative. Thanks. Administrative inquiry.
Your worship, it's not so much an administrative inquiry, probably more of a notice of motion.
Okay.
And council would vote on it if they want that in our HR policy.
All right, I'll let you know the section.
Any more administrative inquiries? No. Okay. Does anybody have any notices of motion?
Yeah, I do, I guess. So I don't know how to frame that. The 2 topics that I seen that came out of the conversation was an allowance, like, as far as gifts in kind go, and then staff time being used with regards to PR and volunteerism. So is that enough information?
Yes.
Okay. I get Renee to repeat what I just said.
So a notice of motion would be, is it an actual resolution that we have to?
It's typically drafted as a resolution, so maybe just for clarification, so for staff volunteer time, that's allowing staff to volunteer during their regular work hours for some.
Yeah, if there's something, especially as it relates, if it's a a PR activity as well, it might already be in the budget, something like that.
Okay, so this is a resolution then now.
So be it resolved that council instructed administration to bring back information on policy regarding volunteerism and
Gifts in kind, yeah.
in kind, and bring a report back to council.
Isn't gifts in kind already in our HR policy?
And
Yes.
that's for clarification, just for, I'm not too sure.
Well, regarding the 100 bags, like I can't believe that, I don't want council to have a conversation about donating 100 canvas bags every time somebody asks. Like it should be, there should be some sort of baseline that says administration is able to.
Give 100 pins to my
Yeah.
hockey for.
If it's within a certain budget anyway,
Yeah.
so either run out of that budget and then you would need to come back to council then.
Wouldn't that just fall under economic development budget anyways?
In my mind, I think it should. but
Yeah.
I guess it goes back to why we have a long conversation about 100 canvas bags.
But I think we were also having a conversation on if we wanted to do anything.
Right, so then I guess the question would be why was there
A motion.
a motion anyway?
Which it should have just been deferred perhaps to economic development.
Yeah,
Yeah, you're spending, there's a line there between economic development and a donation to a,
Okay,
so we'll work with that.
okay. So is that resolution, that motion here?
Would you like me to read it again?
And it'll come back for next meeting.
Yeah, the council can vote on it whether they want administration to proceed.
Okay, sounds good. You good with that, Councilor Moran?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Any other notices of motion? Okay. It is 3:46. I will call a 5-minute break and we'll come back for closed session.